Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Ecosystem for Smart Combination Products, What About Regulations? Presented by Redica Systems, formerly known as Govzilla, and Napoleon Monroe, Managing Director in New Directions Technology Consulting. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the Zoom QA feature, and we'll share as many as we can during the QA section at the end. After we're done, I'll send out a copy of the slides as well as answers to the questions we received and a recording of the presentation. Before we begin today, I want to quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Taylor Minks, and I'm the event coordinator at Redica Systems. Redica Systems is a technology company using data, analytics, and expertise to deliver meaningful insights to quality and safety professionals around the world. By applying artificial intelligence to large disparate government data sets, Redica System empowers its customers to improve compliance, increase product quality, and build a more efficient organization. Founded in 2010, Redica System serves over 200 customers in the pharma, medical device, and food industries, including 19 of the top 20 pharma companies and 9 of the top 10 medical device companies. Today's presenter, Napoleon Monroe, is the sole inventor of the InMed medication telemanagement patents owned by New Directions Technology Consulting, a single member LLC. Napoleon has been involved in the successful commercialization of patents and other intellectual properties for decades. He spent 20 plus years at Survival Technology, now a part of Pfizer, where he built and managed the IP portfolio. At Survival, with his team, he invented and commercialized 3 patent medical devices. 2 are auto-injectors, one of which is still the primary U.S. delivery system for nerve agent antidote. Another was a trans-telescopic peak flow monitor. Napoleon led his team that invented, prototyped, commercialized, and scaled up pharmaceutical delivery systems. His work included the original EpiPen for treatment of anaphylactic shock. Napoleon has worked in regulated healthcare industries for many years. However, he is a business leader, not a professional regulatory expert, and the opinions herein should be relied upon as not as regulatory guidance. And now I'll pass it on over to Napoleon to begin today's webinar.
Thank you, Taylor. Thanks to Redica for the invitation. Welcome to colleagues, both colleagues I've known and colleagues I hadn't previously known. So while Redica and I have our own commercial interest, we share in valuing and making information available and useful. Since the invitation was issued, I've been overwhelmed, and I think most of you have also, with just a barrage of new facts, information, regulations, things are happening all around. I've tried to include a lot of those. We'll move fast. Taylor will take your questions and moderate those. I hope we'll make this good for all the attendees. I'll present some background on smart combination products and platforms, and then following some sections, we'll focus on some topics which relate. As Taylor said, we want to make this interactive, so send your questions in. Unlike many conferences, the slides will be available and the recording will be available, so you can research whatever keywords you want and go from there. I hope you enjoy. The bio Taylor put forth a couple of additions. At Survival, we invented. I helped invent, and I was an inventor on some products, but many people contributed. She told you I'm not a regulatory expert. I'm not. I'm also not an engineer or a lawyer, a lot of things, but I do have some, I think, relevant experience. Next slide. So there is a patent portfolio. It's for sale. There's a poster, which is at my website, Value of Intellectual Property, and there's a June article, Telemedicine as a Catalyst, and COVID as a catalyst for telemedicine. I started writing that sometime, I think in February or March, and it was published in June. So please access if you're interested. Next slide, please. So background, smart combination products. What are they? Drugs, biological devices connected to the internet. There's delivery devices that are connected to the internet, usually through a smartphone. and they're part of a diverse regulated ecosystem. We'll talk about that breadth in a little bit. Why are they necessary? Now, early combination products met real human factors needs, but they were dumb. They weren't connected to the internet. With the advent of the biotech revolution, genetic and personalized medicine, patients' needs for products have changed. The products are often proteins and must be administered other than orally, often requiring home administration, assisting a broad range of patients, practitioners, stakeholders. They have to meet patient needs. So by connecting the stakeholders with smart products, those products become more.
Oh, Napoleon, it looks like I might have lost your audio. One second. Sorry, everyone. All right, Napoleon.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
We could go past this slide to the next one.
Okay, apologies about that, everyone.
Where are we to? Okay. So I've been involved in a number of combination products, not the Surette early on, but everything following that, I had some role. In the early 70s, replacing the Surette came the Atropine. This was a development by Dr. Stanley Sarnoff, who led survival technology. Also on the phone is a president of survival technology, former president of survival, is now doing something else. But the Atropine had several features. It had metal cartridge. We put atropine, morphine, some other products in order to increase the stability. We had an early use of parylene coating. And the product had hydraulic braking. That is, it couldn't move the plunger without delivering the product. So from that evolved the combo pen, which you know as the EpiPen, a commercial product. This is an early version of it. It didn't have the needle guard, but that came later. A lot of products were placed in this device, both for civilian and military use. The military asked that we put a clip on them and they get the nerve agent antidote kit, their version of them, NAC. They were all FDA regulated except for a couple that were introduced for studies. And they all featured a collet drive system with a spring and a front end activation. While I was involved, there were no recalls or reg letters for functionality. We had only one very small batch that went out of spec for stability. And yes, you're correct. It's just a comment. I wasn't expecting it, but I saw it. It is correct. Next slide, please. So there was a progression. We filed a patent or granted a patent for what is now the leading delivery system for nerve agent antidote and organophosphate antidote. And it solved a number of problems. We reduced the size. We reduced the number of components. But more importantly, we solved some issues about operational complexity. If you go back and look at the Mark I, it was obviously clunky. This solved a number of problems. Again, this was a product which incorporated a number of the same systems, the same platform ideas from previous. It delivered two drugs stored in separate containers sequentially through one needle in two different tissue planes. That's why it's still the leading product. Next slide. So we call this presentation the ecosystem for smart combination products. What about regulations? There are two pictures of the ecosystem idea. And the one on the left is a very pristine forest. What you don't see there is the animals who populate it. You don't see the humans who might come into that area. You don't see the upstream devices, if you will, like is there a major dam upstream that regulates the flow of water? So again, it's the ecosystem that we know and love. On the right-hand side is a representation of the ecosystem for smart combination products. It includes the practitioners, the patients, the devices, and the delivery devices, and the communications devices. What you don't see there will be the other elements of the ecosystem. Both of these is simplistic, if you will. We can't show everything, but we'll talk about a number of the other elements of the ecosystem for smart combination products. So next slide, please. What we'll cover, what I learned in some recent industry conferences about smart combination products. They've taken a leading role in healthcare strategy. Loads of money is going into the area of telemedicine, and regulatory issues are obviously a part of the ecosystem. The challenges and opportunities for smart combination products and how some of these themes interplay within pharma and between other stakeholders. At the end, there's a Regulator's Digest and a few comments about the specifics of the conferences. But we'll move fast. Here we go. So the online conferences talked about investment and growth. One of the areas that makes an ecosystem functional would be the money that goes in, the investment. A colleague introduced me to a colleague who has some younger children, the idea of FOMO, fear of missing out. It's one of the driving forces, it seems, in some of the investments. Another colleague called it early, years ago, it's the lemming effect, that everybody, once something starts, everybody jumps on board and moves forward. With investment, and there are a lot of intellectual property filings that are coming along now. Both important areas. We'll talk about COVID as a catalyst. Maybe you're surprised this didn't come as the first slide, but it is very definitely a driving feature of our environment now. Patient centricity, human factors, communications, and how to engage across those areas of interest. Digital everything, data, analytics, platforms, barriers, and silos. Interesting that there was very little specific discussion of return on investment in these conferences. Regulators Digest will have some regulations and standards, and I'll leave it to you to decide what the future is going to be in regulations, but I'll be interested in hearing what you think. Next slide. Money, 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 money. Necessary for a healthy combination products ecosystem, and especially for the smart combination products ecosystem. Digital health, telemedicine, and on-demand services are both or all driving a lot of investment. The specifics are shown in the body of the slide. But the important thing is, I see that the investments are often more strategic than financial. Not looking for a quick in and out, not looking for necessarily the financial gain on the products per se, but as part of their strategy for their businesses. The trend is to larger deals. Generally, larger deals are smarter deals because there's more at risk. Deals are well known, but internal investments are not so well reported. There are a lot of those as well. Next slide. Again, investments in growth. Notable, a number of vertical and horizontal integrations, investments in those integrations. Some are discussed here. The largest one that's gotten a lot of press, Teladoc acquiring Livongo. That becomes one of the leaders, largest telehealth firms ever. As of December 2020, a number of individuals have posed the notion that pharma and others have loads of cash, making this a time when selective investment environment is felt to be the best in 10 years. Last Friday, Wall Street Journal, US companies are sitting on the largest pile of cash ever. Investors are trying to gauge how they're going to use it. But this, again, part of the ecosystem. It is moving us toward the reality of improved patient-centric, outcome-driven investments. Next, please. A little more on the investments. Things are a little up in the air with Trump's executive order on most favored nation, but that seems to be pretty tied up in some wrangling. The Canadians, one of his other proposals was that we import. The Canadians have said they don't want to do that. Not totally surprising. Everybody's trying to maintain their own systems and their own population. It's not just in the US that the investments are coming along. JD Health raised $3.5 billion in Hong Kong recently. JD revenue is now from selling drugs, but they've already expressed an interest in selling services. Here locally, there are people investing in savings coupons. I'm not an expert here. It seems to me that most of these are directed toward the underinsured or uninsured, but I'll leave that for sorting out later. There are new drug telemarketing approaches emerging. Next, please. So here's the slide you might have expected in the beginning. The COVID is driving a storm in many ways, and I feel like I'm drinking from the hydrant. So I don't know if you feel overwhelmed by the flow of information as I am, but our challenge is trying to make some sense of it. Out of COVID, we're seeing a worldwide emphasis on healthcare. The pace of change has remarkably accelerated. COVID seems to be a lasting driver for telemedicine. Pharma and related regulations have been reduced to allow for faster response. Patient behaviors have changed, but also practitioners' behaviors have changed. The data is flooding in. We're either in the second wave or going into the second wave, but it's emphasizing the need to do something. Again, our article on Catalyst, COVID as a Catalyst, is available. And I'd welcome your comments and thoughts. Next, please. Human factors. When a product goes into a patient's hands as compared to into professional use, that changes essentially everything. The reason is that, one of the reasons, patients are less well trained, less well educated in use, and FDA is not involved in professional use to the same extent. Professionals are practicing medicine. FDA doesn't regulate practicing medicine. Purchasing decisions are very different. Adherence, repurchasing decisions are very different between individuals and practices, that is, between patients and healthcare providers. Storage, dosing, and use. In control generally in the hospital or in doctor's office, not well controlled often outside. This storage situation looks to be a potential problem even for practitioners in the COVID vaccine. There's no way to judge efficacy. When a doctor administers, you know that the product has been administered. In the patient's hands, for non-connected products, you don't know if they took it. If you don't know if they took it, you don't know if it was effective, if you don't know why. So safety, outcomes, perceived experience, the patients have their own individual responses to products, to their fears, to their personal situations, their interactions. One reason that there's much more emphasis on education and training for combination products that go into the patient's hands. The need for feedback because the patient changes their attitudes, their medical situations, everything that's surrounding them changes over time. There's a lot more emphasis on quick start instructions and other means for helping the patients understand the products. So combination products, new and challenging regulatory and operational products. Next slide. So how do we communicate with patients now? Well, these direct consumer ads that you see on the nightly news are really pretty fascinating. I was told by a colleague that their child mimics these and walks around making fun of them. Could be, some of them say, well, this is going to make you feel better. There's some side effects and they could be really problematic. And if you need help with your medications, maybe we can help. But the thrust is, this is a beautiful product and it's going to help you. Information sources after the ad. A lot of professionals become involved. Many of them can write a prescription. Medication reconciliations tend to be pretty perfunctory. Have your medications changed? Okay, great. Then you have the influence of the non-professionals. Largely coming through the internet, with friends, family, your hairdresser, your veterinarian, whomever it might be. Okay, you have a script, you have some information, and you go to the retail pharmacy. Retail pharmacists, like the professionals, are selling time. They are time bound, they have restrictions on their time. And so it moves pretty fast at the retail pharmacy, obviously, unless you really probe it. Any questions for the pharmacist? Nope. Okay, great. Next customer in line. Will that be Visa, MasterCard, or Amex? Okay, now you have your prescription in your hands and you got a patient insert. And that goes directly in the trash because it's not understandable and not meaningful and generally not read. But we can do better. Next slide. This is coming from a number of sources pulled together, but there are thousands of prescription medications available, and we spend a lot on those. Medications, many of them would benefit from better management, compliance, adherence, and the outcomes would be better. This would provide benefit to everyone in the stakeholder community. There are a number of groups supporting legislation demanding electronic medical records interoperability and patient access. That's controversial, but it is moving in that direction. There is legislation. There's been a delay recently in implementation, but it seems to be coming. Research estimates that non-optimized medication therapy results in many deaths, large cost, thousands, millions of patient preventable visits, and a few thousand preventable deaths based on medication errors. This is outside the opioid epidemic. It's estimated that 1 million individuals are seen per year in hospital emergency department for adverse prescription drug events. More than a quarter of these need to be hospitalized. Adverse events are important for patient safety, and many are preventable. So the improvements are possible. Next slide. People are working to improve. The investments in telemedicine and in smart combination products can, I believe, provide improvement. If we understand human factors and train patients well, there are groups that are working in this. Get the Medication Right Institute, GMTRX, was formed a year or so ago. Their thrust is comprehensive medication management, bringing research pharmacists, clinical pharmacists into the guidance systems. The Health IT Now Coalition, a Washington lobbying group, is supporting EMR access, and they were influential in promoting the legislation. American Telemedicine Association. I dropped my membership in ATA some time ago because I was told that I was the only person interested in smart medication systems. The leadership has changed and pharma is now more involved, and I rejoined. So we're hopeful that that very good association can give some support to smart combination products. As of this year, the American Dental Association is adopting HR 7, so dental and medical records can become interoperable, at least can talk to each other. It's important because dentists prescribe. Outside of the normal healthcare orbit, Amazon announced that they were adding prescription services and including pharmacist assistants, and they already own OPEC. Next slide. You may hear, you may recognize that music. That was old. That was 62. The cloud is a progression of the Telstar launch. The ability to work with big data, like began with UNIVAC 1005, which I worked on in the 70s in Seoul, Korea, 8th Army headquarters. All of this is digital and it's all disruptive. Healthcare has been behind in adopting big data, adopting digital information, but they're being dragged into this, kicking and screaming in some cases. There are legal risks, there are massive amounts of information and misinformation. But these two early developments are context for the following opportunities. Next slide, please. The conferences had a wave of big data washing over them. We could provide information previously unknown, except sometimes in clinical trials. Here again, the big data idea is validated by the recent findings in the UK that while we didn't see any anaphylactoid response in the clinical trials, when we went to broader administration, we saw a couple of cases. So again, information is flowing in. The question is, who can find it? Who can find that part of the information that's really necessary, and how? Further question, who will ensure cybersecurity? Evaluate the scientific truths and misinformation, and how? The data is important. Patient levels data for individual assistance and anonymized data for improving population health. Many of you have heard about and worked with value-based payment plans. Again, if you don't know the patient took the product, you don't know that it had the value that it was purported to have. There is a great deal more emphasis on corrective and preventive actions and post
Napoleon, it looks like your audio went out again. 1 second. Sorry about that, everyone. 1 second here.
Sponsor failure to respond to complaints.
Hey,
I hear
Napoleon.
you. I hear you.
Oh, perfect, perfect. We can hear you again now.
Okay, good. So to go back a bit, experience would teach that a single erroneous complaint or sponsor failure to respond to complaints can start a very negative regulatory cascade. With all the data coming in, it's important to understand how we can respond. We can look at our internal data and the external data, and balancing the information can allow us to provide both supply chain and treatment efficiencies. Next, please. Next, please. Did I lose you? Hello.
I'm here. It's switched.
Thank you. So there's not a lot of discussion in the conferences about automated identity and data capture, but it is potentially quite important to being able to secure information on products in the field. In 2013, the final UDI regulation went in force, and the Drug Supply Chain Security Act legislation was passed. This legislation brings us to convergence between two sets of regulations, device and drug. The logic of having a UPC on a product is proven in retail. UPCs were driven by Walmart demand, not regulatory requirements. Enforcement discretion and implementation delays have been a feature of moving toward the implementation and use of automated data and automated identity and data capture. But it's necessary for business and treatment efficiencies, especially e-commerce, that we ask the providers to use the codes that we've already been forced from a regulatory point of view to put on the product. So it's for safety, quality, recalls, preventive actions, all of the above. It's also important to give greater ability to track lot or batch than we have now. My experience is that component suppliers change things without changing the incoming component lot number. And so we need to understand the lot numbers better to be able to track unknown changes. Similarly, software included in a lot of the products now, the smart combination products, changes with great rapidity. If you can't track software version, then you may find yourself with the inability to control your product. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay, a lot of discussion of platforms. We talked about some platforms early on, dumb platforms, but platform adoption is potentially problematic if you haven't a good understanding and a trust in your component or platform suppliers, both necessarily. There was not a lot of discussion of trust, but it's key to all decisions and underlies all good decisions, in my opinion. Some of the specific issues are who controls the regulatory filings? Is a device master file appropriate or important or meaningful? How much weight does a 510K carry when it underlines a smart combination product? Who drives change control? Who pays the cost? How do we ensure continuing cooperation and solid intellectual property? In one of the conferences, someone put forth an example of a company that went forward without understanding the platform they were using and had to write off their entire investment. So due diligence and trust, very important. Next slide. There was a lot of discussion of budgets and who pays for what. Corporations, pharma corporations especially, have a lot of silos. Now, is this investment in a smart product going to be of that particular product, but we want to use it for others? Does it come out of the IT department? Probably not. What's the C-suite attitude toward this investment? How are we going to understand who really benefits? That applies to the pharma company and their partners, including the researchers, subcontractors, device developers, and even their competitors, because often a pharma company will want to align with one of their competitors to move their products forward. All the other entities that are involved have their own silos. And so sorting out who pays what, whose budget is this going to be for a smart combination product, is a barrier to adoption and to forward movement. Next slide. Silos can be or become dysfunctional. This happens to be a corn silo, but it could easily be a silo holding granular gold. If a silo ruptures or goes rogue or assumes too much control, it becomes dysfunctional. Next slide. Now into the regulatory. We're checking the time. Now we're finally getting to regulatory. Most of you are involved. I find regulations can be confusing, complex. Their evolution is beyond most manufacturers' control. They're sometimes contradictory, subject to interpretation, and the whole situation becomes beyond understandable. Your job is trying to make sense of it, and that's all of our jobs. Everybody's trying to make sense of what makes sense in a highly regulated environment. Next. When the regulators digest, just a few points. Audits have now gone virtual. How to manage that? I think we're all trying to learn, both on the regulators' side and on the regulated individual side. So risk evaluation mitigation strategy, public comments on that were open as of November 2020. Signals and Nest, we've talked about a little bit. I think the importance of data going into the regulators through the internet has not been given as much thought as we probably need to. Emergency use authorizations, great. They've worked very well, helped speed approval. Regulators also have the patent, trademark, and intellectual property regulations. These can provide commercial advantage or can be detrimental if not well followed and understood. There's a final guidance document last week requesting FDA feedback on combination products. There are many more specifics. You know them better than I, but these are a few. 2004 establishment of the Office of National Coordinator. All standards of compliance is voluntary in the US, it's mandatory in the EU. 21st Century Cures Act, again, 2016, had more impact than was known at the time, or seen or understood at the time. Over the years, there's been a lot of interpretation of US FDA requirements, and EU requirements have tightened but still remain less clear. The takeaway is post-market surveillance, essentially synonymous with real-world data or evidence, and gaining more emphasis. It's interesting, Scott Coburn in the white uniform presented at the dental community, and the Surgeon General presented also in the dental community, both one in the Dental Trade Alliance and one in the American Dental Association meetings. So we see some things in dental that are emerging. Dental is far behind in general, but there are interesting pieces of information that come out of attending the presentations there. Next slide. So the Dental Health Center of Excellence. Interestingly, the Veterans Affairs, VA and DOD, you saw that they led in early combination products for nerve agent antidote, but they're also leading in sharing information. The upgrade of the VA IT systems has taken a long time. It's been very controversial, but they are a major force, and they're adopting the comprehensive medication management systems that the TMRX providing. So our military is often capable of providing leadership. They did in casualty management, and so they're doing it again with great difficulty, but we can look to them for some changes. Jerome Adams will publish it's CH, not CR, Economic Perspective in January 2021. That is likely to have a large emphasis on technology. Next slide. So there are many unanswered questions about what the European medical device regulation is really going to look like. It will have the force of law. We're suffering, all of us, from scarce notified body capabilities, and that's going to continue. There's been a 1-year delay, but some of the cited reasons for the delay were COVID-19 and Brexit, but a colleague pointed out that really notified body capacity and the lack thereof is really driving the delays. I don't know if any of you taken a new notified body recently, but it's going to be an interesting negotiation. Next. So the evidence burdens in the medical device regulations are shifting toward post-market surveillance. Competent authorities sometimes don't have a unified position on combination products, not to mention smart combination products. That's still formative. There's more global enforcement of local labeling requirements, and the additional labeling requirements of warnings on labels, maximum processing, number of processing cycles, and having the EU representative on the labels are all examples. Serialization is more required than in the US. So other trends, UDEMED is rolling out their post-marketing program, and the general data protection regulation is very stringent in the EU. We may look to that to upgrade some of the data protection in the US. Direction still not known. Recycling cost. Recovery of the cost of the EU is part of the system. It's moving into the US system. Next slide. The other thing that's happening is more and more reliance on ISO 13485. It's not a recognized standard, but de facto, if you have a CE mark on this from a valid, understood, notified body, and it's not something that was made on a copying machine by the cousin of someone who has one. And I say that a little bit in jest, but I was presented over many years with bogus 13485 certificates, fakes. So there's an effort to bring these into the International Accreditation Forum, manages certificates for other industries. This is somewhat at odds with the medical device single audit program. So the regulators want to run this with single audits. That's been slow to gain traction, especially in the countries with lower manufacturing costs. So it may be that these systems run in parallel in some cases. I don't know, but I'd suggest that you follow it. It may have value. The other fact of life is, speaking of money, audit costs have gone up substantially because the audits are more complex and there are fewer and fewer notified bodies who are qualified to do the audits. Next. So there's a certain amount of regulatory nationalism that's going on. It's possible the US may depoliticize regulations, but the specifics are as yet unclear. Brexit is also unclear. The effect of the tariffs and what tariffs are going to remain, unclear. A lot of things for us to look at in the future. Next one. So we've had the elections. We can hope for bipartisan, future-oriented legislation and hope that we don't let this good crisis go to waste. That's Winston Churchill's advice. I don't know how it's going to fall out, but we'll be following it, all of us, with great interest. Next. We talked about the conferences. We used to go to them. Now they're at home. I used to enjoy looking out at the audience and seeing who had a perplexed look or who was shaking their head, either side to side or up and down, disagreement or agreement. I can't do that now, so submit your questions. We covered the primary themes. Here are a couple of highlights. Next. I started writing an individual review of each conference, but that got out of hand. So this was the first virtual conference. Some highlights were a lot of discussion of self-administered combination products and smart products and digital by design and the value of data. Next slide. Then there were some individual presentations, especially interested in Cornell and in Kevin Dean. Philips Medisize presented the past, present, future of auto injectors. Our poster and their poster were side by side in the poster hall. So the virtual poster hall, I might add. Going to these conferences is fascinating, even virtually, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, and it's hard to extract just all of the meaningful information. So here are a few clips from the other conferences. Next. The PDA combination products workshop, I would recommend it. Biannual, every other year. It's well planned, very interactive. Extensive time for Q&A. I learned in that how Teva overcame the EpiPen lead to secure generic approval for their product that they filed some years ago and had been pretty much stuck in the regulatory system. We talked about American Telemedicine Association becoming a force. There's a PatSnap webinar system that I find interesting. Next slide. The dental organizations, we've talked about it already. American Dental is moving to adopt HL7. 2 Informa conferences were bundled. That was a little cumbersome, but at least the Bio Europe conference was interesting. Next slide. We didn't hear a lot about a lot of these things. There was very little, I predict, from pharma, but a great deal of speculation, including here. Next. Prediction. Change. So there's a prediction, and questions are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Napoleon. Now, if anybody wants to take the time, you can type your Q&A in the QA section of the Zoom feature, We'll just take a couple of seconds to wait and see if anybody has questions. And again, just so everyone knows, we will be sending out a copy of the slides and a recording of today's presentation. At the time, it looks like we don't have any questions. I want to thank you again, Napoleon, for presenting today. We usually have some questions roll in. If y'all have anything, please feel free to reach out to me, Taylor at Redica Systems, with any questions, and we can get connected with Napoleon. Thank you all for attending, and that concludes today's webinar.
Thank you. All best.